Today's testimony is a moment in history. We don't know whether it's going towards conviction or something else, but it's a former president facing accusations from his own lawyer who was in the circle of trust at the first ever criminal trial of anyone who's served as president. The only thing that was on my mind was to accomplish the task to make Trump happy, Cohen said on the stand. And for historians, there are always echoes, especially when it is a lawyer, a once loyal aide who even has your secrets and your privilege that might turn against you. And it takes a high bar for a lawyer to even be able to talk. There are restrictions on that. But if you are accused credibly of committing crimes with the lawyer, you might lose that privilege. The echoes, of course, go back to Nixon, whose star witness was a lawyer.
What did the president know, and when did he know it?
I began by telling the president that there was a cancer growing on the presidency, and if the cancer was not removed, the president himself would be killed by it.
Lawyer John Dean turned star witness. Are there echoes today? We have, as part of our special coverage, historian Michael Beschloss. Michael, your thoughts today?
Well, I think you're saying it exactly right, and Nixon is a great place to start. If there had been no John Dean, Richard Nixon might not have had to resign. He might have served 8 years as president. That's how important a witness can be, as you know professionally. Look at Michael Cohen, what the consequences of his testimony, both today and in recent years, could be. If it might be said that if Michael Cohen were not around and not able to give this kind of testimony, Donald Trump might be able to survive this trial.
And when you look at the parallels, how much does it matter that the person, in this case the witness who's proverbially flipped, can explain in plain English, in this case to a jury, in Nixon's case, of course, it was to a different set of, regulators, right, if you will, why they shifted?
Right. John Dean was, of course, in a televised hearing in the Senate, which everyone was watching at the time. I remember as a child I was watching. And the fact that Dean was credible had a lot to do with the fact that public opinion shifted against Nixon. Very different from this. And the other thing is, compare even Nixon, which we thought was a big deal, to what is happening right now. What could be the consequence if Donald Trump is convicted? Well, let's start with the fact that if he's a convicted felon, the state of Florida and New York, felons cannot vote. So could he vote for himself for president, for instance, this fall? But more than that, this could have a big impact on whether he is elected. And this is not Gerald Ford versus Jimmy Carter, 1976. This is a candidate who has promised to be at least a dictator for a day, to review the possibility of dismantling our Constitution, of subordinating the Department of Justice to himself in an autocracy. That could happen next year. That could be riding on what happened today. And one other thing, Ari, let's say that Donald Trump is convicted. We don't know if he's going to be, but if he is, and he's nominated and elected anyway, what does that say about respect for the rule of law? That means that a majority of American voters is saying, we don't trust our legal system. It doesn't work. And we're expressing ourselves by saying, we're going to elect Donald Trump, although he was convicted criminally. If that happens, are we going to be living in a land without law? Will there be any rule of law? Who would feel that he or she should obey a system that so many people have said is obsolete?
A chilling and important question. I want to warn you, you have about 45 seconds till we hand off to Rachel. But this chart shows all the trials. And months ago, many people said, oh, here's the one that's more important. Here's the one that should happen. What does it tell us, in your view, about the humility that history can teach us, the fact that we don't know where things are going, that when we look at something like that, all prior predictions have melted into the fact that for a range of reasons, there's one green arrow left. It's the in-progress trial. The others don't seem like they're going to happen at all.
Completely. And there will be a lot of people who will say Trump was not tried on the more serious charges, and this thing is a sideshow because it involves people like Stormy Daniels and other witnesses who are at least unorthodox. What I would say is that's the way, and I think you'd agree as a great lawyer, this is the way our system works. What was Al Capone finally convicted of? Not his greater crimes, but tax evasion. That sent him to prison. Alger Hiss was convicted not of espionage against the Soviet Union. That statute of limitations had run out. He was convicted in 1950 of perjury. He went to prison. So if Donald Trump is convicted and if he has to serve a serious sentence, that doesn't mean anything less than it might have meant if he were tried, let's say, on withholding classified documents.